Okay, everyone, welcome to Friday in our Parashat HaShavua class, Parashat Aikid. Never turn your back on plan B, and I'll tell you what that means. So in this parasha, Moshe Rabbeinu continues to reflect in his monologue to the people and tell them about events of the past years in order to guide them and to rebuke them, obviously, and to set them straight for the future. And this week's parasha, among other things, he reflects on the debacle of the Het HaEgel, of the sin of the golden calf, way back in the first year of the desert, after the Aser HaDeberot were told to the people. Moshe Rabbeinu, as you know, went up to the mountain for 40 days to receive and study the Torah, came back down, and alas, there was the Egel. Moshe Rabbeinu smashed it, and of course, that is a tragic day. Shiva Asar b'Tammuz on our calendar, it's the first terrible event that happened on the 17th of Tammuz, is the breaking of the Luchot, of the great tablets with the Torah, or at least the Aser HaDeberot ran on them. And Moshe Rabbeinu in this parasha reflects on that terrible event, and he speaks about the fact that, right after that happened, Kadosh Baruch Hu wanted to annihilate you, and I prayed and I saved you. And then I went back up to Har Sinai. At this point, not to, receive the Torah in a secondary way, to maybe get something different or get something more, or receive the Torah again. I went up just to pray. And he mentions here that I went without food and drink again for 40 days and nights, and I was praying on your behalf to try to atone for your terrible sin. And then Moshe Rabbeinu says, and let's quote this, this is in Perek Yud, the first Pasuk Aleph. Moshe Rabbeinu reflects on the following. Ba'et hahi, Amar Adonai Elai. At that moment, after those second 40 days, which I prayed on your behalf, Hashem told me as follows. Pesol elecha shnei luchot abanim karishonim va'ale elai hahara va'asita lecha aron es. Good news. The news is there's going to be another set of tablets, of luchot. And apparently that's a replacement of the first ones. And apparently that's an incredible gesture, seemingly on Hashem's behalf, of forgiveness to the people and atonement of the people's sin. Except for that, reading, not even so carefully, pretty obviously and explicitly, we see two stark differences between the Luchot Harishonot, you can say the first tablets, and the second ones that Moshe Rabbeinu is being commanded on right now. The first is Pesol elecha. You shall carve, you shall craft. You'll be the person to create, so to speak, these tablets. And in fact, lecha, yours, some commentaries say, it's actual out-of-pocket expense, hazit, from Moshe Rabbeinu. So how do we know that's different? Well, we know, first in the beginning of this, in the previous perek in this parasha, but in the original occurrence in Parashat Ki Tisa, we're told that these luchot were not handmade or man-made. In this parasha, we're told that Vayiter Adonai Elai et shnei luchot abanim. God gave me the tablets, 2 stone tablets. What does it mean, gave it to me? Apparently, these are immaculate. These are not man-made, which is obviously supernatural. It's a gift given by God to Moshe Rabbeinu. Likewise, in the original story, in Parashat Ki Tisa, it says, Vayifin vayered Moshe min hahar, he came down from the mountain. He went up empty-handed. He came back down with 2 tablets of testimony in his hand. So obviously, the first time around, this was a complete divine, you can call it a miraculous act of God, where he gave him the luchot. And here Moshe Rabbeinu has to craft them and carve them out and sculpture them on his own. The second difference in this pasuk is, V'asita lecha aron es, and you shall make for yourself a wooden box. Now, mind you, this is not the Aron, because at that point in history, there was not yet a command. There was on Har Sinai, but there wasn't on the ground, an actual command of making the Mishkan yet. Bezalel, the chief of staff, head of operations of the Mishkan, crafted the Aron and was covered by gold. This is specifically and only as the Ramban points out, it's purely wood. Moshe Rabbeinu is being told to make a mundane, simple box of wood and to put those tablets of stone, which you carve on your own, into that box. It seems like a terrible degradation of the prestige of the original luchot and presentation by Hashem. Originally, there was no box. It was not necessary. God, so to speak, handed him 2 tablets, and he brought them down, and they were carried by Moshe Rabbeinu with his own hands. Now, we will say that there is a similarity between the first and second luchot, and that is that here Hashem says, Moshe says, reflecting on the time, that Hashem told him, Ve'echtob, or in Pasuk Bet, Ve'echtob al haluchot et devarim, and I will write, says God, on the luchot, the first words and whatever text that were al haluchot harishonim asher shibarta, on the first tablets which you broke. And so we do know that the miraculous writing, and I say miraculous because both in the original occurrence in Parashat Ki Tisa, where it stated, the haluchot ma'aseh Elohim hema, they were the workings of God, these tablets. The hamichtav, in the writing, was michtav Elohim, who was the writing of God, the famous term, harut al haluchot, which we understand to be a miraculous presentation of the text on these tablets. As well over here, it mentions it was kamichtav harishon, it was like the first writing, the second tablets of the same writing, and this is this miraculous presentation where we're told, as we're told in Parashat Ki Tisa, Mishneh Abraham, Mezehem Ketuvim. They were written, or they looked the same on both sides. If you were to write on one side of something, on the opposite side, it looks backwards. And yet, the writing was identical on both sides of the luchot. Obviously, that was supernatural. And also, the insides of every letter, the letters that were enclosed and had a full enclosure, where there was a circle inside, meaning that should, so to speak, collapse. And it was suspended in midair. And those are the 2 miracles. And in fact, in Pirkei Avot, we're told that one of the items, physical things, or concepts, you can say, created on Ben HaShemashot, on the dusk of the 7th day of creation, was hamichtav, the writing on the luchot. So that was the same in the first and second tablets. However, there seems to be a drop down in the prestige and the physical makeup of these tablets, and seems to be very sad. Yet, if you didn't pick up, we need to pick up something very paradoxical in this pasuk, because the pasuk points out the 2 distinctions. A, Moshe Rabbeinu carved himself, not godly, divine. B, that there would be this mundane wooden box, and yet the same pasuk says, "Sheneluchot abanim harishonim," as they were in the beginning, like the first ones. How could you say like the first ones? I just told you about the differences and distinctions between the first tablets and the second set of luchot, and that is quite difficult to hear. Now you're telling me in the same breath, Hashem, karishonim. Now you might want to say that the word karishonim is referring only to the writing. That wouldn't really be the peshat of the pasuk. And in fact, the Sforno points out on the spot that the message of one of the messages of Moshe Rabbeinu here in recalling the story was that, listen, I prayed all that time for you to be able to elicit the forgiveness of God and bring you to a point of atonement. And after all that, I'm sorry to say that there wasn't a full reversal and corrective activity as far as the Luchot were concerned, at least. And that's part of what Moshe Rabbeinu was conveying to them and rebuking them about over here. At that time, Hashem said, carve Luchot with your own hands in a box. With all your prayers, you couldn't, so to speak, retrieve the previous status quo. So the word Kadishonim is very suspect here. On one hand, there's a drop down. There's not a godly, divine set of tablets that was the first time around. On the other hand, the Torah is telling us like the first ones. And our job is to understand in what regard, in what respect are these luchot, is it appropriate? Is it justifiable for Hashem, for the Torah to say on the second set of tablets, Karishonim, like the first ones? And I want to present to you what I think is two profound ideas and use commentaries as a piggyback the commentaries, use them as a trigger to bring about these concepts. What do you do with the word Karishonim? So I'll tell you about what Rabbi Hirsch says, but first, a little bit of a intro to that. You know, after the original Ma'amad Har Sinai, the greatest moment in human history, and then the debacle of Het HaEgel, you can very well say, Hashem could have very well said that, look at these people. They sinned so egregiously right after this event, this golden calf, no matter how you define the sin, it was ugly and it was a lowly, terrible stain in our history, on our people. It could have been said, we could have thought, it sounds blasphemous, but it could become from God, where he would say, listen, adjustment is necessary. I see the people aren't what they presented themselves to be. They've sinned. They no longer earn the Torah as previously presented. And perhaps, just perhaps, we'll adjust now the second time around. Hey, first tablets are broken. I know I told Moshe Rabbeinu for 40 days and nights about the entire Torah. We have an opportunity now to craft and write on a new set of tablets, and perhaps the message might be a little altered to match the situation and the people in their, let's call it, lowlier state, in their new status. And indeed, Rabbi Hirsch says that is not only not the case, but the exact message over here, Karishonim. And the words of Rabbi Hirsch, at least translated to the English, is that God will not alter his law to accommodate the lapse of man. And let me explain you the message he's trying to convey. We know that halakha sometimes is, so to speak, adjustable. Especially over the centuries, the Sfaradi poskim were known in a situation to be able to adjust the situation, the halakha, to accommodate the situation. But all that ever means is taking the very same fundamentals, the very same laws, the very same rules and protocol that we have of, we'll say, adapting or calculating laws in new situations, and simply taking the variables and creating a new formula to the situation, but never at all compromising on the basic fundamental laws in Torah shebichtav and Torah sheba'al peh. Never. Here, says Rabbi Hirsch, the message is karishonim. There will be no adjustment over here. Yes, man is flawed. The Torah is absolute. It's the only absolute truth in this universe, on this earth, and in our lives. Everything else is relative. God's Torah is absolute truth. And therefore, it is timeless, regardless of how people flaw, regardless of the difficulty of a situation, regardless of the different surroundings and places and times that we may live as a Jewish people. The Torah transcends times. The law is absolute and not adjustable. There's no such thing as progressive Judaism in terms of our approach to uncompromising observance of Torah law. It's obviously where the other denominations went off. There's no reform of Torah, and there is no adjustment of Torah in this respect, in terms of its fundamentals. And therefore, I want to tell you something, Moshe Rabbeinu. The people are flawed. The situation is ugly and distressing. But these two luchot will be karishonim. They will convey the same message. They will hold the same basic foundational laws of Torah with no change, with no compromise at all on its integrity and its foundation. Message number one. Message number two. Abarbanel points out something very interesting. And that is that, look, the people sinned terribly. Their dream was shattered, literally and figuratively, when the luchot was shattered. And it seems that their sin is beyond repair and makes the situation one that is beyond repair. And yet, somehow, here's luchot again, Am Yisrael. What a chesed that Moshe Rabbeinu is now reflecting upon and reminding the people of, that despite their sin and despite their lowly status, here are luchot again, karishonim, the same gesture of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to offer you the opportunity to have luchot, meaning the text of Torah, recorded by God. He wrote the second luchot as well. He authored them, he wrote them, even though he didn't present the tablets, but karishonim. It's the same Torah presented to you, even though you're flawed and you sinned and you had an egregious, erroneous act with the Het HaEgel, but karishonim. And I think that is a message for the ages, both for Am Yisrael and for individuals, because we had imagined something glorious. We were shown something glorious. They were godly, they were divine. It was a utopia that we imagined. Everything that we could have thought we were going to be, a nation exalted in Har Sinai in communication with God, the first and only time in the history of mankind, and represent that and to prove that and to testify to that, these tablets, it was perfect. And now we're shattered. It could never be again. It will never be again. We'll never be able to retrieve that status. And yet, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us it can be and it will be. I want to tell you something, says God. Life is not a fairy tale. Very often, things do not play out the way we expected. We build a community and our antagonizers come in, they persecute us and oppress us, and they wipe out that community. Now what? We have a land, we're exiled from that land. Now what? We build our institutions and they close our institutions. Now what? As individuals, of course, we have great plans for ourselves. We'll build this business, this person will accomplish this in our life, and it doesn't happen. You know what now? Plan B now. That's what now. Let me just mute you again. And therefore, the message of Moshe Rabbeinu and HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Moshe Rabbeinu is that these luchot are not plan A. This is not what you imagined, and yet they are karishonim. It doesn't seem as glorious. It doesn't seem the high standard that which we dreamed of, but so often, the second time around, when we are moving and presenting and doing something in a place and a time and in a manner that we thought was not going to be the way we wanted to begin with, it ends up being more appropriate and more fitting than we originally imagined. And I'll prove it to you. These luchot are the luchot that, although they shared a place with the broken luchot in the wooden box until Bezalel created the Aron, and then afterwards they shared a place in the Bet HaMikdash with the broken luchot. But these are the luchot that were called luchot ha'edut. These are the ones that were in the Kodesh Kodashim. These are the ones that we believe are now on, the whole world's fought for, are now on Ginizah, and we yearn for to see them again. These are the ones that our eyes are fixed on, our future redemption to come soon, God willing. These are the luchot of our dreams. The second luchot, the plan B, with sincere commitment and effort, when things don't work out as a nation, we're resilient, we pick ourselves up, we dust ourselves off, and sometimes the reality that we're forced to build becomes superior than the utopia of that which we dreamed. And therefore, says Moshe Rabbeinu, these little second luchot seem mundane, they seem disappointing, they seem like a drop down, but indeed they are karishonim. They are more powerful than the first, not just like the first, but even more powerful than the first one. And therefore, never turn your back on plan B, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because often second best in our lives as a nation and people can be transformed into best. Shabbat Shalom.